everyone. It is me, PCOS Girl, and we have an exciting Instagram live coming up this evening as part of the Heart for PCOS 10th anniversary. We have two very special guests that are going to be joining us that'll be here in a moment, but before I invite them on, I just wanted to remind everyone of a couple of things. With Heart for PCOS, we've had a month of free content for everybody to enjoy. We have an online magazine and e-zine on issue. The links are in the bio in my link tree. We also have a lot of live events, including this one this evening, and some on Facebook as well. So be sure to check out PCOS GURL on Facebook and Instagram to find the live content. And we also have a brand new YouTube channel that has over 30 interviews that were recorded for the month of February. There's 1 to 2 interview almost every night. So check out our YouTube channel at Heart for PCOS. That's HERT for the number 4 PCOS. Also tonight we have a live fundraiser going for PCOS Challenge. We're trying to raise $10,000 during the month of February for our 10-year anniversary. So if you can, $1, $5, $2, every amount matters. Tap that button below and make a donation to give us some hope and a better future. So I'm going to invite our guests. I think they're both here, so let me see if I can get them online. And we are going to be chatting about PCOS and cardiometabolic health and cardiovascular health with Pollie. So I'm just invited Hillary, and there's Hillary. Hello, Hillary. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing phenomenal. I just have to get myself in the shot here. There I am.
I know. Okay. Where's the up-down desk? There we go.
You're looking fabulous, and I'm so excited to have you here this evening as part of our live chat on Instagram about all things PCOS and cardiometabolic health and cardiovascular health, and hopefully we can clear up a little bit of the misconceptions and talk about the importance of why we need to recognize these risks and how we can minimize them. So I'm just waiting for Jane to get here.
You're
I'm
amazing.
sorry.
Up here at night doing these things like this. I'm like 8:30. Oh my God.
Sleep is like anymore over this past month, but you know something, it's been totally worth it. This has been the biggest campaign that we've had thus far during the month of February. We started this 10 years ago, and it started out as just a bunch of people changing from teal to red on Go Red Day or Wear Red Day. And it's kind of evolved into this like big campaign where we have all of these experts like yourself coming on board and helping educate people about the condition. So,
did you notice my teal?
I see it. And I am wearing a Heart for PCOS related shirt tonight, even though I can't get it into the frame. But I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about why we need to recognize these risks that come along with PCOS, because a lot of people don't understand that with our condition, which often comes with inflammation, insulin resistance, androgen excess, that over time, that can really affect our health and our symptoms. So when you're counseling patients or when you see patients, what are some of the symptoms that you're noticing, or I guess some of the red flags that something's not quite right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to start by first saying it drives me insane when we hear too much like PCOS is most, common endocrine disorder in women of reproductive age, as if it goes away when you hit menopause. And it doesn't. It's a genetic condition. It's with you for life. It's totally manageable. What I see, because women with PCOS are at higher risk for cardiovascular complications. What I see as red flags, of course, is insulin resistance in young women. In my job at Boston IVF, they're really good about testing for insulin resistance and doing lipid profiles. And occasionally I'll see a young woman with PCOS with a cholesterol profile that actually looks more like an older man, and that you have high cholesterol, high LDLs, elevated triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol. So, HDL is healthy for you. You want it to be as high as you can get it. LDL is lousy for you. You want it to be low. So when we start to see these type of profiles in young women, it is a red flag that we want to get on, trying to help them learn how to live the healthiest lifestyle they can at the youngest age possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive into that in a minute. But first of all, I was a horrible host because I didn't even introduce you, Hillary. So I'm going to introduce you and Jane and let you each tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into the PCOS space. So Hillary, let me start with you.
Okay. My name is Hillary Wright. I'm a registered dietitian. I am the director of nutrition for Boston IVF, and I'm the author of the PCOS diet plan, which I first wrote in 2010 and revised in 2017. I don't have PCOS myself. However, I ended up in this world 23 years ago, going through an experience of secondary infertility myself. I had gone to see a doctor because things just weren't quite working. And I was working in a large group medical practice in Boston at the time, where I basically went down the hall and I said, something's not right. I need you to test me. And I fortunately had some, minor hormonal tweaking and, was able to have my family. But I developed a relationship with this reproductive endocrinologist who was really a trailblazer. So this was in 2000. She was talking about PCOS when nobody else was. Her name is Natalie Schultz. She's still out there somewhere. And so she said, will you see my patients with PCOS? Will you partner with me? And I said, sure. I have no idea what that is. So I then had to go educate myself on that. So that was 23 years ago. In the year 2000, January 2000 was the first time I saw a woman with PCOS in my office. And through that area of expertise, I eventually developed relationships with other people in the field and have been the director of nutrition for Boston IVF since 2006.
Well, I can't believe that she was talking about it back in 2000 because I was diagnosed in 1999 and I couldn't find any resources or any doctors who wanted to talk about it. It's gotten better, but we still have a little ways to go. And we also have Jane here from Pollie. Oh, there goes my camera. Jane here from Pollie. Hi, Jane.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. I'm thrilled to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Jane. I'm one of the, and great to meet you, Hillary. And I'm I'm one of the co-founders of Pollie, which is a women's health startup, and our first product is a mobile app to help people manage their PCOS symptoms. And today it's available for iPhone users. We will have an Android version coming out in the next few weeks, which we're very, very excited about. And Pollie essentially just brings personalized lifestyle support to people who have PCOS. And so we're very complimentary if you are already working with an OBGYN or endocrinologist or even going through fertility treatment. And my story is that I was actually diagnosed with PCOS when I was around 19 years old. I was a freshman in college, and I had a pretty typical patient experience to what a lot of people go through, where it took a long time to get that diagnosis and then an even longer time to figure out how to manage my symptoms. And I ended up taking this lifestyle-based approach. I was fortunate enough to do a lot of lab work with a specialist and figure out what was catalyzing my specific case of PCOS. And it was really once I was able to do that and take this more curated, individualized approach to figuring out my own body that I actually saw an improvement and even reversal in symptoms. And so it was just such an empowering experience for me. And professionally, my background is in management consulting and venture capital, but I've always had this hormonal health passion because of that own experience that I went through. And so my co-founder Sabrina and I started Pollie a few years ago to help just accessing quality PCOS care easier for people.
It's really important because Hillary and I started diving in a little bit, talking about PCOS and some of the risk factors for things like cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and the fact that there seem to be three main factors, which are insulin resistance, inflammation, and androgen excess, that drive a lot of these risks. So with Pollie, you have lab tests that you do and you have a management plan. So why is it important that we routinely check our labs, or at least establish our labs, and then create a management program?
Yeah, it's so important, and lab work can be so powerful, especially if you have a chronic issue like PCOS. But even if you don't, even if you're just a normal person, I feel like this country needs to do preventative labs and just like routine lab screening more often and more frequently. But in terms of like the labs that we look at with Polly, we're always looking at like a full androgen panel. And so thinking about like testosterone, DHEAS, just those types of hormones that can qualify you for a PCOS diagnosis, and in most cases are the reason for your symptoms. We also look at things like a metabolic panel. And so what does your fasting glucose look like? What's your HbA1c? We do look at fasting insulin. That's a little bit of like a controversial one, just in terms of like whether the marker is accurate. But anyway, insulin resistance, there's a lot of like symptomatic stuff that we look at as well. And then we look at cholesterol and different sorts of like heart disease or cardiovascular risk markers that, again, anyone should be doing on some form of a routine basis, but it's even more important with PCOS. And then depending on the lab package that one is getting, you can also opt into getting like a full sex hormone workup, a full thyroid panel, etc. But I'd say that those like first three buckets I mentioned, the androgens, the metabolic stuff, and then the lipids are really like the most important for us. And we really want every single member that comes to us either getting those labs drawn through Polly or through their physician, and then we can then assess the labs that their physician has drawn. But it's really important when it comes to like personalization of care. And Hillary, I'm sure that you know this, but I mean, obviously you know this, you do this with your clients, but if someone is insulin resistant, which is like the majority of people with PCOS, like the dietary recommendations and even like exercise and just like all the recommendations that someone would get from a healthcare provider are going to be different than they would be if like inflammation and stress is catalyzing your symptoms. And by looking at the lab work, we can really see like what is the cause of this case of PCOS. With most people, it's several causes, but it's important to have an understanding of like what is actually
Absolutely.
causing somebody's specific symptoms.
And dovetailing off of that, Hillary, when you're seeing someone and reviewing their labs or information that may come from their providers, is every person treated as if they have risk factors, or are there certain things that you look for when you begin assessing a patient or creating a plan to optimize health or prevent future risks?
I mean, you know, I think what's pretty clear is this thing that we call PCOS, which we know is kind of a weirdly named condition, given that it's named after a symptom, not a cause, is we're really talking about several different things. I mean, not everybody presents in the same way. So not everyone is going to have the same manifestations. For example, I've had many women with PCOS whose lipid profiles look fine. And again, I've seen other women, young women, whose lipid profiles look like older men. So it really can vary from person to person, how it manifests itself. What I really go to great lengths to do is to help people understand what these labs are, to actually explain them to them, to actually explain, you know, which ones you absolutely have to be fasting before you have these tests. Other ones, it's not, you know, is not important that you are. And then connect the dots between diet and lifestyle strategies that can actually impact these numbers and how it impacts these numbers. So my commitment from day one with women with PCOS is I refuse to believe that people can't understand this. They just need it explained in a way that they can, that makes sense to them. So, and you know, it's what I try to do with my book and with my counseling strategies, is to help see, like, you know, so see this elevated triglyceride, this is what may be going on, and this is what we can do about it, because there needs to be hope that these, you know, you're going to have a heart attack when you're young, look at your lipid profile. Like we have to try to empower people every step of the way. And so to actually connect the dots in a way that makes sense beyond just, you know, lose weight, exercise, eat more vegetables. Like, you know, let's really talk about insulin resistance. How can we influence this number? How can we improve these numbers? Because we want to empower people to know that things can get better. And these labs can be scary, particularly if nobody's explaining them and they're looking them up on their lab portal. You know, I mean, they see the numbers. They don't necessarily know what they mean, because there can be a difference between something that's mildly elevated or significantly elevated. But if you're just looking at a number, it might have a big red H next to it and you don't know, you know, what that's about. So knowledge is definitely power, for sure.
And going into this like a little bit more, talking about insulin resistance, and this is going to be for both of you. I would love both of your perspectives on this. I have a lot of people that say to me, oh, you know what, I'm not insulin resistant. Excuse me. I don't have to worry about my insulin levels. What is your take on that? Because from my understanding of it, is just because you're not insulin resistant doesn't mean that you're not having issues with your insulin with PCOS. So, Jane, I'm going to start with you, and then Hillary, I'm going to have you chime in as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that everyone should still be thinking about their insulin. It's such an important marker. And even if you are not like clinically fitting the bill for insulin resistance, it's just really, really important to make sure that your metabolic health is staying good through the course of your life. And like low blood sugar can still be an issue. I'd say that like no matter what type of PCOS that you have, excuse me, I'm about to cough, having a coughing attack. No matter what type of PCOS that you have, you really, really want to make sure that you're keeping that blood sugar stable, because that can also have an impact on like inflammation and androgens. And I'm going to take a water break. I'm so sorry.
Sure. And Hillary, how about we let you chime in on this?
I'll pick up the ball for you, Jane. So what people is very important to understand is the typical test for insulin resistance, hemoglobin A1C or a fasting glucose test. They only tell you if you've been insulin resistant long enough that it's starting to affect your blood sugar. So I always explain that, listen, insulin resistance is something that occurs on a spectrum. We're most familiar with its most advanced stage, which is type 2 diabetes. But everybody with type 2 diabetes prior to that had prediabetes, where their blood sugars are bumping up, but it's not high enough to call diabetes. But everybody with prediabetes had a period of time prior to that where they were insulin resistant, but their pancreas was youthful and energetic enough to just produce extra insulin to overwhelm the resistance. So the glucose numbers look fine, but there's insulin resistance going on behind the curtain. So as Jane said, you know, there's controversy around fasting insulin levels. You know, people don't agree on what a normal level is. But, you know, there's clear risk factors for insulin resistance, and PCOS is one of them, as is family history of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You know, those with a BMI over 30 are at higher risk of insulin resistance. So in a perfect world, we wouldn't wait until somebody has prediabetes, for example. So I do hear that a lot. Well, I don't have insulin resistance. My numbers are normal. Well, I will say, but you have risk factors.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We don't have great ways of figuring out what's going on behind the curtain. So let's not wait until you have prediabetes. Let's just assume there's a likelihood, because the way that you would eat and be active and all of that is going to be healthy for loads of reasons. So why not, you know, kind of get into it early instead of waiting until it's a diagnosis of insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And that's so important, especially because, like you said, we kind of wait until some of these symptoms manifest, and a lot of times it will happen like in our 20s sometimes, but like our 30s or 40s, and as we get older, it just keeps building and building. The problem with that is we start developing these risk factors that you were talking about in girls as young as 8, 11, or in their teens, when they start experiencing symptoms of PCOS. So in a lot of the studies that you see about cardiovascular health and PCOS, they're actually talking about younger women having higher risk factors for cardiovascular disease than older women. And that's because we're dealing with the insulin resistance, the androgen excess, and the inflammation at younger ages. So it affects our arteries, our blood pressure, our cholesterol. So we have to be hyper vigilant, and we have to get out of using that phrase that we talked about, women of reproductive age, because it affects girls, again, as young as 8, 11, and in their teens. And PCOS definitely doesn't disappear after reproductive years. So perimenopause and menopause, you're still going to carry it with you and carry those metabolic risk factors. So I wanted to talk a little bit about lifestyle management and why it's so vital with PCOS, especially after what I just said about these risks develop at younger ages. So Jane, why is lifestyle management and creating a care plan so important with PCOS?
Yeah, you know, I think, and also I'm sorry for the coughing fit. I had a cold a few weeks ago and I am still like hacking up. Anyway, I would say that like when it comes to all chronic conditions, whether it's PCOS or something else, behavior change and like the day-to-day of your life, they are just so key for really learning how to take back control of those symptoms. With PCOS, there are of course medications. You know, you can be on birth control or metformin or Spiro or something else, and those medications can be very powerful. And we're very pro meds at Polly, although we cannot prescribe them today because we only work with dietitians and health coaches. But that being said, in order for the improvements seen with the medications to continue, you need to continue the medication. And so if there's some form of a med that you do not want to be on for like the duration of your life, you will need to learn how to like somewhat adjust your lifestyle, thinking about like nutrition, exercise or movement, sleep and stress management, to better support your body. And I would say that like in terms of like the big gaps in care with PCOS today, obviously getting a diagnosis is difficult for many people, which is such BS because it's not a difficult condition to diagnose for. You need to be careful with like making sure that you're eliminating the prospect of other conditions that can show up as PCOS. But it's not that hard. You know, it's like lab work, doing an internal ultrasound if needed, and having irregular absent ovulation. That's not really like the huge issue that we see. Getting the medication is not the huge issue. Most doctors know they jump right to like birth control, metformin, Spiro. The really big gap is that physicians have not necessarily been trained in like nutrition science or exercise. And even beyond that, even if a physician was trained in that, or even if they kind of just like went and educated themselves on it, they don't have enough time to sit with their patients and kind of walk them through it. It's really working with a nutrition specialist, whether it's like a registered dietitian or like a certified nutrition specialist. There's some form of nutritionist that is under a regulated body, is our preference, at least at Polly, although health coaches can be really helpful also. They are the ones that know about the nutrition science and like how your body reacts to food and how your metabolism really works. And beyond that, how you can like enact that in your day-to-day, because telling someone to just lose weight or telling someone to not eat carbs, a doctor can do that, anyone can do that, but it's much more difficult to like work that into your routine. And that's why like one of our advisors is a behavior scientist, and she's done a ton of research work, and she's also worked a lot with like diabetes startups. And it's really important from our perspective, like as a tech-enabled solution, to make sure that we're considering like what actually motivates people, like how to leverage positive psychology and stuff, because it's really hard to try to overhaul your life. And so I would say that like I'm kind of rambling here at this point, but I think that focusing on like sustainable changes is so important. And I really do firmly believe, and Polly as a whole does, that there are ways to like manage your PCOS in a way that like doesn't ruin your life, you know?
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's important.
Absolutely. And Hillary, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about this, because this is kind of your wheelhouse with nutrition and lifestyle. So why is it important to create a plan, an individualized plan, and start that plan early? And what role can lifestyle management play in reducing risks?
I mean, I think lifestyle management is the primary strategy for managing PCOS, because even if people do utilize medications to fine tune whatever they have going on, you know, spironolactone for, you know, excessive hair growth, there's a lot, you know, in the fertility world, there's a lot of things that could be happening. But the diet, you know, medications should never be presented as, you know, you can either take the medication or you can do the diet and lifestyle thing. So what needs to be clear for women with PCOS is that you know, there is no mandate to follow some over-restrictive diet that's just going to be one more torturous session of feeling like you failed because you couldn't keep up with this over-restrictive plan that was not sustainable in the first place. So trying to come up with an individual plan that takes into account the person's specific life, their preferences, any other aspects to their health. So that's where registered dietitians can be really helpful, because women with PCOS doesn't mean you don't have other issues too that may need to be folded into your lifestyle plan. So, you know, I'm a big believer. It's interesting because I've always said I'm like the 80-20 person. Like, I don't expect perfection, and you shouldn't either. And then recently, when I was updating one of my other books, my pre-diabetes diet plan book, I came across something with USDA that said if 85% of your calories are coming from foods that are bringing along a lot of good nutritional value, we all have 15% of our calories to, to mess around with and have some fun. So there's a lot in the PCOS community of good foods, bad foods, don't eat this, don't eat that, not evidence-based guidelines. So, it's pretty clear that eating more of a plant-forward diet and cutting back on red meat and too much added sugar and all of that will be helpful. But there's room to fit in all kinds of things. And if we come up with approaches that are too restrictive, they're generally not sustainable. And when they don't last, people blame themselves instead of saying the plan was destined to end that way.
Right. So how do we create sustainability with someone who's starting a care plan? Jane?
Yeah. For
Sorry
us,
about that.
oh no, don't worry at all. For us, I'd say we always start with like figuring out where someone is at, and we're very intent on meeting somebody where they're at. And so that gets into like, what life stage are they in? Are they really focused on career now, or are they a student, or are they trying to get pregnant? Also thinking about goals, and goals are a big one, and a lot of our members, their goal is to get pregnant, and it's either like right now or like in the next 1 to 3 years. A lot of our members want to lose weight or just optimize their long-term health, and some want to just like feel better in their own skin and like feel more confident in their social life. That matters also. And then thinking about preferences is the last one. And so like openness / willingness to like make changes to their diet and exercise routine, stress management routine, etc. And like, do they have any hard rules when it comes to diet? I'd say like diet / exercise is really a loaded one, especially with women, just because there has been so much pressure from society to fit this specific like thin mold that a lot of people, is just not realistic for a lot of us, and it can be very toxic. A lot of us have just like consciously and subconsciously ingested that sort of information and messaging for like our entire lifetime. And so we do have a lot of anti-diet and intuitive eating resources. And we love when members do decide to kind of take that route with us. And I'd say that like at Pollie's core, while we do provide like meal plans and more of like a traditional approach for those who want it when it comes to like meal planning and thinking about nutrition, we really try to like educate people about like how to build a balanced plate, what it means to eat in like a nutrient dense way, what that means for like grocery shopping and meal prepping and like going out to dinner with friends. And I'd say that like that's kind of how we think about sustainability. And then the other thing I would say is that unless you have like an allergy or a very serious autoimmune condition that's super sensitive to like eating like dairy or wheat, most people are able to eat. Like if you have a slice of cake at your friend's birthday, it's not going to derail your entire PCOS symptom management, Yeah. And so that's something that we're also very focused on, like making sure that people internalize, because again, diet culture and social media and stuff for ages have just told us that it's either 100 or nothing, and you can't sit at some in between.
Right. And Hillary, what are your thoughts on creating a sustainable plan, how to go about starting that?
So the first thing that I do with my patients is ask them, who do you live with? Are you working? What do you do? It can help us get a sense of maybe how someone's brain might work. Or, what kind of shift they might work, what kind of work they're doing. I also will ask them, do you like what you do? Because when people are working in jobs that are really stressful, it can make it hard to, preserve a piece of the life pie for self-care. And then I will do an in-depth kind of a diet recall, a food frequency, to try to just get to know what this person's life is like. Because I'm as interested in their eating pattern as I am in the kinds of foods that they're eating. Because we know, particularly as relates to insulin resistance, there can be differences in terms of how the body utilizes insulin based on time of day. So we live in a culture where people, women are great dieters until about 4:30 in the afternoon, when their brain has finally just had it, which often leads to kind of an escalating pattern of eating. Which can make it difficult, because if someone has insulin resistance, there's a good chance they're more insulin resistant at night and more insulin sensitive earlier in the day. So we'll start talking about, what time do you have to get out of the house in the morning? Trying to encourage people to start eating early. So it really gets down to the behavioral strategies that can align or help them to come up with an eating pattern that they can kind of hopefully get going on, fairly early in the day, and then try to figure out, how do I keep this going throughout the day? And that can vary from one person to the next. So, people may eat breakfast, lunch, an afternoon snack, dinner. They may have breakfast, half of lunch here, half of lunch there, a piece of fruit in the car on the way home. All of it is designed to try to get people to pay attention to the importance of their nutrition throughout the day, as opposed to, and again, a lot of this is diet culture.
Yeah.
Eating is bad in diet culture.
Yeah.
But if you ignore your brain long enough, your brain is going to win in the end. And that often happens at night, when the whole thing just blows up because of the over restriction. So when we educate people about insulin resistance and what is actually going on, it makes a lot more sense to them why I would encourage them to become proactive eaters, to try to guard against reactive overeating, not because you're a weak loser who lacks willpower. Guess what? Humans don't have a lot of willpower. It never favored survival to resist food. But, again, diet culture would be like, well, you should just, stiff upper lip it. And, I'm just here to tell them, like, listen, your primitive cave girl brain is going to stop driving the bus if you don't stop driving it proactively, earlier in the day. So it's really getting people to relate to how they're eating and how that makes them feel is much more meaningful than just do this, just do that, listen to me because I'm a dietitian with a lot of credentials. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in empowering them to understand their own body.
Yeah, I love that. I think empowerment is so important. So, guys, how about some good news? When we start implementing lifestyle and start having sustainable plans, what's the good outcome with this? Can we have a good outcome with this? Jane, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, yes, and the research really shows that. Obviously, PCOS needs more research. It's a female health condition; it's underfunded, but there is more research on like the cardiovascular impact of PCOS and how diet and lifestyle can impact like androgen levels and metabolic markers, and stuff that can then in turn impact our cardiovascular risk than you would expect from like your typical physician appointment. And so in our opinion, if you get ahead of this and if you treat PCOS as a canary in the coal mine and take an empowered and proactive approach to managing it, rather than see it as like this life sentence of a condition that you have zero control over and will just be a victim to for your whole life, you can very much so help lower your risk for that cardiovascular issue or potential cardiovascular issues down the line. I really, really do find my PCOS diagnosis so empowering. I think it is so cool how it's helped me like learn a lot about my health at a really young age. And like there was a time there where I knew way more about like my fertility status and my metabolic health and my inflammation that I had going on in my body than any of my friends at the time. And I think that just that reframing can be very powerful.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And you've definitely just changed my perspective on things. That's definitely so important. Hillary, what about you? What are the good messages, the good outcomes that we can have when we start implementing healthy habits and sustainable plans?
I have to say first, Jane, I'm laughing to myself because just yesterday I used the term, who was like 20.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you probably know what this means, but PCOS is a canary in the coal mine. It tells you something about your metabolic potential. Yeah. So from one of the things we need to dispel right out of the gate is that with attention to diet and lifestyle and medications as needed, women with PCOS can improve their fertility and have babies. So the things that you're doing to improve your fertility, you're squelching inflammation, you're managing your insulin resistance. That's going to help to regulate your reproductive hormones, those same diet and lifestyle strategies that are good for insulin resistance and optimizing your fertility are good for your lipid profile and your cholesterol numbers. You get your glucose stuff under control, your triglycerides go down, and all of these are indicators of metabolic health. So, and this all is I think, again, it can't be stated enough. No matter what your weight is, you can improve these numbers. you can be a healthier person. You can practice, anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle behaviors that in women with PCOS, and I sense a lot of frustration with people are kind of sick of a lot of the over restriction. And I love when somebody comes to me and says, listen, I'm like kind of just over the weight thing. If it happens, it happens. I just want to feel better in my body. And when people are eating in a healthful way, more plant-based, less ultra-processed food, regular physical activity, prioritizing getting sleep, they just feel better in their body. And that is a major win, because it is a reflection of what's going on the inside if you're kind of noticing and feeling the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a very valid point, feeling comfortable in your own skin. And I think that's at the crux of a lot of the frustrations that PCOS patients have is, first of all, you've had a lot of providers over the years that have blamed patients for their weight instead of listening to their stories and understanding the reasons why they may be having issues with their weight. And that could go for someone who is overweight, or that could go for someone who is thin, that can be told there's no way in hell you can have PCOS because you're too thin. So, I mean, I think the health at every size is extremely important, and that people realize that, yeah, our bodies react to a bunch of different things, and getting healthy is the best option, and a lot of other good things can come from that. Now, one thing I want to ask both of you about, because we're talking a lot about empowerment, and I don't know if either of you are going to be attending PCOS Challenge's PCOS Advocacy Day this year, but it's going to, yay!
Oh yeah,
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be March 2nd, 2023, and there's still a couple of days to sign up to register. And this is really important because we're talking about a lot of these frustrations and empowerment and getting money for research. So I wanted to find out from both of you, do you know yet what you're going to say to these congressional leaders? Jane, how about you?
Yeah. I think it's going to be very heavily focused on like the future health risks of PCOS, like similar to this conversation that we've had today. And Pollie is a startup, and we do have like financing from external parties, from like venture funds and other folks. And so I've pitched Pollie and like the whole problem of PCOS from like a financial opportunity and like financial cost perspective. And obviously that's like the financial services sector, and they're different than politicians, but they still care about money. And so I do think that focusing on the cost outcomes, in my opinion, especially for people who may not have like an experience dealing with other healthcare stuff and thinking about healthcare conditions, it can be a powerful thing, in addition to like, of course, talking about quality of life of patients. But that's always kind of my angle, and that's what I focused on last year, and people seem to be receptive to it. And so I think that's my current plan. What you, Hillary?
I love it. How about you, Hillary?
Oh, dead on. They care about money. That's what they care about. So talk about things like, 50% of women with PCOS will have diabetes or prediabetes by the age of 40. That's very costly. Women with PCOS have higher rates of infertility. Fertility treatment is an extremely expensive process. I think there's 16 states that have some kind of coverage for fertility treatment, no matter what the cost is. And those aren't even universally the same sort of laws. So, rates of infertility in general are going up, and women with PCOS are the highest population related to fertility challenges related to ovulatory problems. So this is affecting their constituency. This is affecting, healthcare is we could go on and on about how oriented it is to treatment, which is really expensive, and prevention is so potentially valuable in terms of dialing back people's reliance on medications, for life. So I think I agree with you, Jane. I think it's not that I don't think they care that people want and should live good lives. They care about money and dollars and budgets, and I find that resonates. Every time I've done it, they listen, because they
do. They do. And
it's a gigantic thing.
Yep. And
Yeah,
I
and if
think
you,
that's why we absolutely need like more patient-centered research studies,
yeah,
to get perspectives from lived experiences that patients with PCOS have, because we're talking about money. We're the ones who are going to be buying the products and are going to be paying the doctors for our treatments. So, I think it's important that there's some recognition of that as well. I am definitely going to be talking about improving care practices for everyone, ensuring more funding for research because we get less than
yeah,
0.1% of funding for PCOS, and that's worldwide. That's not just the US. So imagine
yeah,
like 1 in 5 worldwide, and we all get to share 0.1% of
yeah,
funding for this condition. That's absolutely insane. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about like the metabolic risks. And I always hate saying this because I don't want people to think that infertility is not important with PCOS. It is extremely important. I went through infertility with both of my children, so I would never diss infertility because I know how hard it can be. However, I think once we start realizing all of these metabolic factors and all of these risks for diabetes, for cardiovascular disease, that puts things into a little more perspective, and increases the urgency to do something about it a little bit more. So we'll see how it goes. If I encourage everyone, whether it's infertility, metabolic health, you know, anything that you feel needs to be addressed, to sign up for PCOS Advocacy Day. So guys, I would love each of you to tell everyone how they can get in touch with you on social media or websites or your apps, so they can learn more about you, they can follow you and get all of this great advice that the two of you have. Jane, I'll start with you.
awesome. Yes, we are on Instagram and TikTok at pollie.co. Our website is www.pollie.co. That's just co, not .com. And then what else? We have a podcast called Hormone Zone that's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We also have our app, obviously, the product, and that is available in the App Store. And so if you have an iPhone, you can use it now, and you can just search Pollie, Pollie, or Pollie PCOS or something, and it'll pop up. And again, the Android version will be out soon. And so if you have an Android, you'll find us in the Play Store shortly as well.
Awesome, and I'll make sure when I share this live to my feed that I get your links in there as well. And Hillary, how does everybody get in touch with you?
Well, my website is pretty boring. It's HillaryWright.com. HILL, 2 L's, Hillary Clinton. On Facebook, I'm PCOS Diet. On Instagram, I am HWrightRD, and PCOS Diet. God, when am I? It's too late. I know. People can look more about the nutrition. Somebody wrote a question in here, how they could reach me. My practice is run through Boston IVF's website. They have a wellness site, so you can go there and look at about the nutrition program at Boston IVF. One thing I wanted to say, just in closing, I always find when we talk to these legislators, they're shocked when they hear the statistics of the numbers of women affected by this. It's a big attention getter. So I would encourage anybody who's speaking to their politicians to go in there armed with, they say 5 to 10%, certainly in different ethnic groups. I think the numbers are even higher. They're probably even higher than we appreciate in general. So anyway, just a plug for that.
No, you're right, because in some countries like India, it's up to, I think it's like 24%. But yeah, the worldwide average is about 21% of patients people have PCOS. So that's astounding, and we definitely need to do something about it. But I know with the two of you in our back pocket that we will continue to have the support that we need as patients to make this change happen. So I thank both of you so much for sharing your time, your expertise, your passion for PCOS and for advocacy and for education. It means the world to me that you joined me this evening, and I hope that we can do this again soon.
Absolutely. You're a beast, Ashley. The things that you do are just phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. There's more to come. This is what retirement looks like for me. I told everyone I was retiring, but I don't know. I just can't give you guys up. So, hopefully this year will be a big difference and we'll see a lot of changes. And I'm looking forward to a bright future for this condition. So, everyone, please check out all of the content that's free, 100% free for Heart for PCOS. Again, the Instagram lives, the Facebook lives. There is an 83-page e-zine magazine that's available. What else, guys? Yeah, YouTube channel that has over 30 videos that were pre-recorded for this month. So take advantage of these resources because they're not always easy to come by, and these are the best of the best. Until our next interview or live or post, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you all soon. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.